The Nachi free Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time live stream has officially begun. Anyway, I want to make this as entertaining as I could for, well, there's nobody watching right now, so fuck it. Well, for anybody who comes in, I want to make this as entertaining as possible because I'm going to be talking about a very boring subject, healthcare. And I want to make it as entertaining as I possibly can. And I really would love to solve this problem single-handedly, if possible. Take all the credit, but I know that's not going to happen. But this video, for anybody who's, let me see, do I have any fucking viewers? No viewers. You know what? It's probably best that I have no viewers right now. Let me see how it's working on the actual stream. Okay, well, I'm live now. And so let me just get this. One person watching. It might be me. Who knows? Anyway, obvious internet. What's up, bro? Thanks for tuning in. But look, I'm gonna definitely invite people in later on. I just want to get this out of the way and talk about healthcare and the whole point of this stream, which is I want to make it part of a series. I'm throwing myself off here with a little delay. I want to make it part of a series, which I have already started, and it was Let's Solve the Criminally Overpriced U.S. Healthcare System, Part 1. This will be Part 2. And here, let me screen share my previous video. So it was this one. And here's where I was talking about, especially in the first video that I did, you know, trying to tackle this problem. I was talking about the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think that it almost totals to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the fraud alone came out to like $270 billion a year. BL Frieder, what's up? By the way, can you guys let me know if you can hear my computer hissing right now? It's because I'm having issues with my laptop. I'm in the process of getting a new one sent to me by Microsoft. But let me know if you guys are hearing like us, other than me, of course. Wait right here, so you guys see it. Because if it is, I'm gonna then keep this short to about. If you want to fix it, set limits on the price of things to allow for the exception of pre-existing conditions, and there needs to be a safety net for those that can't pay for legitimately. Yeah, and then here's what I'm discovering the more I research, which, by the way, man, I highly recommend this book. Oh, let me take off the screen share here. Stop screen sharing. Anyway, I wanted to recommend this book on American Sickness, and I hope I'm just saying it backwards, but whatever. The point is that this is a great book. I have yet to finish reading it. And the more I research into healthcare, man, the more I'm concluding that perhaps, yes, it is right. The more I'm concluding that perhaps single payer might be the solution. And I hate to say that because that would mean I'd have to agree with Bernie Sanders. And I can't stand Bernie Sanders. But I don't want to get into divisive rhetoric either. But suffice to say, the reason why I can't stand Bernie Sanders is because he's a Fidel Castro scrotum-sucking apologist. But I don't want to get sidetracked with that. The thing is also with Bernie Sanders, whenever I hear Bernie Sanders talk about healthcare, he comes at it from such a moralizing standpoint. It's a right, and it's a moral obligation. Yeah, he doesn't even fucking work in the healthcare industry. It's real easy to go around telling people what they need to fucking do, especially if you don't work in that industry. And that's what really bugs the shit out of me about someone like Bernie Sanders and people of that line of thinking, that sanctimonious, self-righteous, moralizing bullshit, which, by the way, works both ways. Okay, if you're gonna go around insisting on moral obligations where doctors and nurses have to fucking just drop everything and just fucking take care of you because they're obligated to do it, well, guess what? People are also obligated to take care of their own health and get their shit together. Self-responsibility. And I don't mean to not, you know, there's enough people I know who are overweight and all that, but dude, I'm sorry. I mean, there's enough self-induced healthcare problems. address that too. And you never hear that from fucking Democrats ever, because they're trying to win votes. And that's the whole thing. And that's why I've always tried to really understand the motivation behind both Democrats and Republicans, especially when it comes to healthcare. And needless to say, the debate with Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders at town hall meeting, it was interesting to see these two career politicians, is what they really are. So is Ted Cruz, sorry. How they're vying, like what is really motivating them to have these arguments? I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to assume that they do mean well for people and stuff like that. But there's got to be other underlying agendas. And I think that's also part of the problem of why we cannot come to a conclusion on healthcare in this country. And that is because whenever they do have these town halls between a Democrat and a Republican, it always just ends up being this moralizing argument. And both of the morals that they're trying to present make sense. I mean, again, for me, I'm coming more and more to the conclusion of single payer and starting to see things from the point of someone like Bernie Sanders, not so much because of it's a moral obligation, but simply out of pragmatism. It would just be so much easier. Like right now, look, man, I'm in between jobs. Okay, fuck it. I'll say it. I'm unemployed. All right, I got laid off. Fuck it. And now's when I'm really feeling the pinch of fucking healthcare, and I am worried. And especially since I have been shopping around, dude, it's like $500 a month at least for me to get healthcare. That'll fucking bankrupt me pretty soon. That's and that's the thing. I know that it's criminally overpriced. I'm using the word criminally, for effect, but it's clearly overpriced. It's artificially. It's just the pricing of services and products and healthcare in this country are just so clearly overpriced. And I think if we had single payer, single payer as, in other words, the government is paying the way we do it with education, at least with fucking primary education from kindergarten through senior year in high school, okay? And now, and it's interesting to hear Republicans making the case for vouchers, which I agree. Why don't we do the same thing with healthcare? And we have vouchers, man. And that way we can still have the private end. And of course, that's the big argument that I understand from someone like Ted Cruz is, you want to get government out of the way. And I agree, man. I agree 100%. With single payer and you're going to start regulating practices as well, and what it takes, for example, with pharmaceuticals. As much as it costs, people always complain about pharmaceuticals as well. Oh my God, they're so clearly overpriced as well and stuff. But the regulations for the pharmaceutical industry, for them to get a drug passed, at least I'm going by what Ted Cruz had quoted in his town hall, was like about $2 billion in fees and regulations and the whole process of getting things approved. That's a problem. It's, and I know the solution to this is not that fucking difficult. Enough countries have already figured this out. And then that's the tricky thing is how do you present this to people? Because the problem is every time you present this argument, and especially single payer, and I was one of those people who like single payer, fucking socialism, fucking Cuba, my parents love Cuba. I don't want that. But the more I start to understand it, I'm starting to think, well, you know what? I think single payer might be the fucking solution to this, man. Especially when it comes to pre-existing conditions. Like, I don't know. For all I know, I might fucking have cancer in me right now. I'm going to definitely be getting a physical pretty soon. And at one of these clinics, one of these MD clinics, which I think is great. That's the free market at work. And now it's going to cost a little bit, but hey, that's a one-time shot. The last I checked, to get a physical over there is like $150. I'm willing to pay $150, okay, for one time to get myself checked out and stuff like that once a year. I'll do it, okay. And I'm pretty sure that physical shouldn't be that expensive either. I got a feeling it's not going to be that long for me to do. But anyway, the bottom line is that what if I discover I've got cancer, no health insurance? I'd be fucked. I'd be fucked. My life, I'd be one of those people. And yeah, for anyone who's like, oh, you're a fucking hypocrite because now that it's affecting you, now is when you're fucking, yeah, that's how it fucking works. when something really affects you, that's when people get off their ass to do shit. And I always took healthcare for granted because I always had some job at one point or another, and I've always been a very healthy person. And whenever I do get a physical or whenever I get my blood pressure checked and all that, I'm great. But now it's a fucking issue, and this time I'm worried. And especially now that my wife and I are thinking of having a kid. What are we gonna do? I mean, if I were to try, I wouldn't even want to think about having a baby out of some sort of health insurance. That shit would be at least easily $10,000, $15,000, quite possibly $20,000 just to deliver a baby. And that's that. You have to be on top of those fuckers, making sure they don't circumcise just for the sake of circumcision and all the fucking and everything else that comes with the delivery of a baby. And again, I don't feel like I'm entitled to a hospital's time. I don't feel like I'm entitled to medical services either. But the thing is, the reason why I'm like, dude, there's something wrong with it is not simply because it's morally wrong. It's just so fucking overpriced. It's just such a fucking ripoff. Anyway, let me check in again with the comments. You see, okay, cool. We got a couple more people. Wow, now there's a lot of comments. By the way, can someone really quick let me know? I'm going to type this in. Can someone let me know, is there a hissing sound coming from my computer? And now let me start checking comments and see what you guys are saying about all the shit that I'm talking. You want to fix limits on the price of things? Yeah, that's the thing. And that's where you would get that with single payer from what I'm starting to understand. And of course, that's what a lot of doctors, that's what a lot of the private businesses don't want. And I don't blame them. But, bro, stop fucking eye gouging us with your fucking prices. And that's the thing. There will still be competition in the healthcare industry. You still have that. You just have a single payer, in case anybody doesn't know. And I'm assuming most people who tune in are intelligent enough to know, but for anyone coming in on this video later on, single payer just simply means that the government is the ultimate payer of healthcare, which is not to say that they're the only ones. You could still have private insurance if you want, but there should be a base. I guess the bottom line that I'm trying to look for is, which most people are also trying to look for, no one should be going fucking broke over healthcare, and much less in the United States. And that's true. And again, depending on how you want to see it, whether it's a fucking moral issue or it's a fucking right, I think those are all moot points. I think if we really want to solve this, we need to start showing numbers and how it works. Anyway, let me look at the comments. Sorry, I keep saying that. Let me see. And then I'm going to show some numbers that I've been doing. The other problem is we have doctors that will prescribe stuff for no reason other than to rack up a bill. They're encouraged to set certain prescriptions. Yep, that's fucking so true. Oh, someone here, Bobby Lyons. Nachi, I respect your ambition and attempting to take on this topic. I kind of like Bernie, but he is too socialist for my liking, to be honest. Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not only that he's too socialist, he's too fucking impractical. Look, let me show you why I know this guy is fucking, he's off his rocker. I'm gonna screen share when Bernie Sanders was on Morning Joe last year. And let's see. And that's, of course, my own fucking screen. Where's my fucking arrow? Bernie Sanders. Okay. This is what this guy has to say.
What is the role of private health insurance in this country? Is it to provide quality, affordable health care? I think not. It's to make as much money as they possibly can. And we're going to have to make the decision to say, I'm sorry, we can't make money out of health care. Even before.
We can't make money out of health care? Dude, that's where he's wrong. Like, look, I don't want to take him. I don't want to take his words out of context. Maybe he just meant we need to take the ability to make a profit in healthcare just for the insurance companies, but everybody else should be able to make money. Maybe that's what he meant. But he is. I mean, the fact that this guy actually admired Fidel Castro. I get the feeling this guy, even having been, what was he, a fucking wasn't a governor. He was the mayor of fucking Burlington Coat Factory. I forgot, but he was in an executive position to a certain degree over in Vermont, and I think it was that. I think he was either a mayor. I could probably look it up really quick on Wikipedia. The point is, even with all that shit, this guy has got. I'm surprised he does not realize the power of the free market and the power of innovation that is incentivized by profits. And that's what worries me. That's why I'm so glad this guy's not fucking president. I'm going back and forth. I really wanted to keep this as organized as possible. I'm just going back and forth. First of all, let me check. Is anybody hearing the hissing sounds? Let me see what people said on the hissing sounds. Commies love single payer. I'm not a fucking commie. You want to see how I'm going to prove to you that I'm not a communist, okay? Look, even though I'm wearing red, and red is still my favorite color, okay? But I just have to throw that in there. A screen share really quick, once again, and I'm going to show you how I am not a communist, all right? Would a communist be selling T-shirts? Would he do that? Would a communist do this? Would a communist go around trying to sell T-shirts with blunt masters and the legalization of marijuana? Look, that's something else I agree with Bernie Sanders on. Anyway, I am clearly not a communist. I'm trying to hawk my wares shamelessly, but that's not what this video is about. Even though if anybody wants to buy any T-shirts, it's at teespring.com/stores/Nachi-free. I'll put the little fucking link in there. Anyway, look, let me get back to this. I'm looking at the comments here. Let's see what else people are accusing me of. Communists love money, just ask China. Oh, of course, because what's going on in China, it's not that they're communists. It's a dictatorship that just will not let go. And I'm sorry. Let me finish that thought. China is still a dictatorship that will not let go. But that's why they have free markets now, because they realize, oh, what the fuck? We can still keep control and still be in charge, but make money. Why the fuck not? You know. And by having free market reforms, I don't know to what extent the Chinese people would have revolted anyway, but I think it kind of keeps people at bay. Also, it's like because the majority of people, let's face it, they don't really give a shit about politics, you know, and that's why it's such a fucking mess because people just don't get involved. And it takes a while. Hey, look, I didn't have my political awakening until my 30s. Okay, so I understand it takes a while, but let me see. The industry is set up so people are okay. Nobody's hearing. Okay, cool. Nobody's hearing the hissing. Then perfect. Then I'm sorry. There's so many comments over here. I wanted to start addressing them. You know that they don't want people to have proper medical coverage because if people were able to access even the poor better healthcare, they would live longer, which means they would use more. Yeah, I mean. If I had known how the left would react or how we would have Marxist indoctrination bills at our colleges, I might have voted Trump too. Yeah, dude, look, I think I would love to read all the comments, but then, you know, I'm trying to see them as I go along. And in a little while, I'm just going to start inviting people. Okay, I just want to at least set the stage. Here. I think one of the biggest problems that we're also having, now all this confusion, why the moment you say something like single payer, people are like communism, and I was one of those. Okay, I always thought single payer, universal fucking healthcare, communism. You know, and it's not. It's really not. It's not that fucking cut and dry. This is not about taking away people's property rights. This is not about ushering in an authoritarian government at all. And I think, that was the thing that I wanted to talk about, the numbers. Okay, and I think we need to talk more about that and not get so much into the fucking philosophical moral dilemmas and all that other fucking bullshit. So look, here's the last thing that I wanted to share on screen. Let me share. Of course, there I am fucking talking shit. Okay, can you guys see this? I just did a really quick thing. At $50,000 a year, a $50,000 a year salary, your typical federal income tax is about 19%. Okay, that's including Social Security and Medicare. Okay, and under the current private insurance model that we have, when you're paying for insurance through your employer, you're usually paying at least somewhere close to $300 a month. Okay, and that $300 a month is about 7.2% of your income. So then that's the other thing, like if you really start looking at the numbers, like if they were to, if all of a sudden they were like, okay, look, you guys want to have single payer? All right, we're going to have to increase income taxes, the federal income tax by 5%. That's still cheaper than what you're paying for privately, because privately at $300 a month, it's almost 7.2% of your income. And that's not to factor in what the company is already paying for you. So that's less money that they would have been paying you, because that money could have been going into your pocket, but now it's not. That money is going to pay for an insurance policy that they're mandated for. You see, that's, I think that would be another great thing about having single payer. You would free up many companies from that burden, which is why when you would hear Donald Trump talk about this, Donald Trump has very quasi single payer ideas in mind. That he's definitely for eliminating the whole thing about pre-existing conditions. In that sense, the few times that I've heard Donald Trump talk about how do you call it, healthcare, that's where he sounds pretty humane, dude. He seems to understand that. And of course, running many businesses, I'm sure he's painfully aware of the cost of healthcare to a business. And I'm starting to wonder, man, if single payer is the solution to that. So with all that said, fuck it. Yeah, I'm gonna start inviting people in. Fuck it. At 9 viewers, how bad can it go? How wrong can it go? All right, so this way I don't have to be checking in with comments and shit. Look, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna invite. It's an open invite. Okay? I'm gonna post up right now over here, see what you guys think about what it would take. Open invite. If anybody has got any ideas and stuff, because look, ultimately what I like to do, aside from using this healthcare series as a marketing gimmick to sell t-shirts. Sorry, I gotta make a living, okay? Especially since I'm unemployed. Ultimately, look, I don't expect to single-handedly solve this shit, but I would love to make, ultimately, either a documentary or a video, whatever, that just details, look, here's the fucking solution to healthcare in this country. Take it or leave it, okay? And you detail that, and you make it so that even those, obvious, what's up?
Not much.
How you doing, dude?
Pretty good, pretty good.
So let me just finish off this thought on the whole thing, how I would, the whole point of making this series, which not all my videos are going to be about healthcare, of course, but ultimately I would want that. I would want it to culminate into, I'm just going to use this for a second. I would want it to culminate into a single video that details this for even the most strident, ardent capitalist. And they'd be like, you know what? I think maybe single payer is the best way to go. We would eliminate the stress that so many people have in this country. And you would still have innovation. You would still have private practices. You would still have that. And you'd still have competition in the marketplace. But anyway, that's the ultimate culmination of these videos. And I'm amazed I still have 13 people watching. Thanks. Thanks for all of you watching. Hey, what's up, Captain Colpal? All right, so let me unmute Obvious over here. Anyway, why can't I unmute this guy now? Coño, I can't unmute him.
How about now?
Okay, no, there you go. All right, did you mute yourself or something, or?
No, apparently you have to unmute yourself because it's Google.
Ah, okay. So what's up, man? So what are your thoughts? I was trying to keep up with the comments and stuff like that, but what do you think about all the bullshit I'm slinging?
I don't mind the option of single payer. It makes sense on paper. The problem I have is when you actually look at countries that have socialized medicine, you see a large population that is heavily dependent on the government, and the government just basically owns them. You want to go to the doctor? Well, guess what? Wait in line. That's socialism. Socialism equates to stand in line. The government will eventually take care of you and the 90 million other people.
Okay, that's where I gotta disagree with you, because from what I understand, the technical definition of socialism is an economic system where the means of production are owned by the state, or by the government. And in this case, that's not the healthcare industry, the hospitals and stuff. None of that would be owned by the government. They'd just be getting paid by the government. And I think you could still have that option where people want to have supplemental insurance and stuff, or they want to pay for extra services, they still could. And the thing is that, man, healthcare is so incredibly expensive, especially in this country, since it's so way overpriced. I mean, just artificially overpriced, that it's impossible for people. And even if you get insurance, it's still, like, nowadays, for me, just shopping around, man, I'm looking at $500 a month. You know what I mean? And I get it. I get that whole argument that people have, like, you want to avoid the government control, for sure. But again, can be done, and it seems to be being done in free market nations with free market economies and democracies.
The problem I mostly have is we can't even trust our government to properly run most social services. And yet we want them to somehow transition into a functioning we can't even get them to run Medicaid properly or Medicare, let alone state medical benefits. Most free clinics are, like, if you go into a free clinic to get your tooth pulled,
Right.
if you have a cavity, they won't fill it, they'll just pull your tooth. And the problem is, when you have the government overseeing things, it no longer becomes about the quality of care, but the cost of care.
No, for sure.
Yeah, we need to get, the biggest problem, I think, is we need to get the pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare companies out of government, so that way they're not spending billions of dollars trying to get new laws passed. That was the problem with Obamacare.
For sure. And I think a lot of that happens because of the apathy of, and it's not even so much the apathy of so many people, which I myself am included. There was a very big chunk of my life where I was apathetic to this, but it's also the time constraints. I mean, there's only so much people can get involved. But again, this is a series, and I'm looking for right now, though, man, like I said, the more I do research, man, it does seem like as long as those already part of our taxes. And here's another thing I wonder, if with the amount of waste that does go on currently right now, we probably wouldn't even need to raise taxes for single payer. I bet you if it was just, and that's the trick, how to get it to be properly managed, as far as paying out, and try to weed out as much corruption and fraud as possible.
Well, see, that's the biggest problem with single payer is once we allow a system that the government oversees it and our taxes are going into it, then those are supposed to trickle down into quote health benefits. Just look at the Social Security or welfare system again. There's so much waste that very little of it goes to what it's supposed to. Most of it just goes towards facilitating the system, not so much paying out the benefits.
Yeah, well, let me ask you then. What do you think is like the ideal way to have it set up? Then, what would you suggest?
I think if people have pre-existing conditions that limit their ability to properly pay, they should have a governmental supplemental that they can pay into. I don't have a problem with that. They can subsidize, the government can subsidize a little bit of it as long as they're paying into that subsidy. The other thing I think that would really help is there needs to be a serious sit down with the pharmaceutical companies, with a lot of these insurance companies, and say, okay, does it really cost this to facilitate this? We need the kind of regulations that prevent, like, fast food companies from putting horse meat in their food. We don't have that with insurance companies. They have free reign to almost do as they please for the most part. You have the FDA basically saying, you know what? There's nothing wrong with putting said chemical in food. Well, it might cause cancer. Now we got to go pay for this. There needs to be the kind of oversight and regulation that would clamp down on this, but we don't have that currently.
Well, that what you're talking about then is somewhat of government control as well. I mean, that's where I'm like, the more I research this and study it, yeah, it's because I always used to be as minimal government. I still am as minimal government as possible, just to the point of almost being an anarchist. But man, it's inevitable, dude. You're gonna have government. I mean, government is just, even among anarchists. You know, if you get 10 anarchists that try to fucking organize a little rally, they're going to make very quickly a little fucking government of their own. They're going to delegate duties and stuff like that. It's bound to happen. And they're going to have, in order to get their message right, they're going to regulate certain things and stuff like that. And so that's why I think it's interesting to hear you mentioning these things, which is kind of what you would almost have under single payer. Like with single payer, the government would probably be stepping in a little bit more to really control some of these shenanigans. Like you wouldn't be able to just be getting billed, these outrageous fees for like $300 a pill, for certain, like let's say ibuprofens, or, those stories that you hear when you actually look at the itemized bill of an ibuprofen pill at a hospital. It's like fucking $75 and shit like that,
I'm okay with the government stepping in with protective legislation for the consumer. However, I'm not okay with the government saying, all right, hand us all your money, and we will make sure at the very bare minimum you will get health coverage. Now that health coverage might be less than what you thought, because, hey, there's a lot of people that we need to cover. So you may have paid in $500, but there's $500 being split amongst, I don't know, 500,000 people. Again, I'm okay with consumer protection and the government acting as a consumer watchdog. I'm not okay with the government facilitating benefits. It's the same way with a lot of the welfare system.
No, for sure. Yeah. There's got to be. And now look, here's the other thing that I was just that crossed my mind right now. When I think of all the money I've been putting into, for example, what was it? The last company I had, which was, I think it was Aetna, was my last health insurance company. It was. I was Aetna Health Insurance. I had been paying, because with the company that I worked for, I worked there for like almost 12 years. So that was 12 years of me just fucking paying in and paying in and paying in and paying in and all that shit, right? And I think maybe I went to the hospital once. That was like about it. That I had there twice. The point is that I did not really get, like, for example, if I get fucking cancer now, or if I get discovered with cancer now, I feel like, holy shit, all that money I fucking had put into this pot is now gone, because now, since I'm not working there anymore, I'm out. So it almost feels like it's in vain. Whereas if I had been paying into, for example, a tax, it had been a tax. Instead of paying Aetna, I was paying the U.S. government. And I lose my job, it doesn't matter. It wasn't in vain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see the argument for that as long as everybody is paying, it's good. But again, like with Social Security, it was great when everybody was working. Now there aren't so many people that are working, and there are even less people that are participating in the labor force. So the pool of Social Security starts to dry up a little more, and then people start living longer, which means they have to pay out more benefits. Then you have to add in, well, we may have paid out way too many benefits to people that didn't need it. Oh, and now we got to pay all the governmental workers wages and pensions to facilitate it. So your $100 that goes to insurance, maybe $10 actually goes towards the insurance. The other 90% is to facilitate the $10.
No, granted, I see what you're saying, and I think something like Social Security, that was, I mean, Social Security also needs to change because clearly life expectancies now are way past fucking 65, and that's part of the problem with Social Security.
And the other problem with Social Security and like with single payer governmental systems is they hardly ever factor in the cost of inflation. The $733 that most people on Social Security get, that's SSI. It's $1,200 if you're on SSD and you've worked to your full potential. That's not even enough to pay for the cost of living in most US cities. But the government says, well, we factored it in, and according to this, if you eat enough top ramen and go to the food bank, I think you'll be okay.
No, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, I always thought to myself that something like Social Security, that's really nice. That is a hell of a luxury to have, that, after a certain age, that's it. I don't have to fucking work anymore. That'd be great. But yeah, how do you sustain that? How do you realistically sustain that? And of course, in smaller countries, whenever I hear people talk about Sweden and Finland tend to be like the role models people always love to use. Yeah, they have less than 10 million people in those countries. They're mostly homogenous populations, that's why that can sort of work. But I don't know, man. I'm starting to, like I said, especially now since healthcare is really affecting me. That's the reason why I'm like, dude, there's got to be a fucking solution other than me now fucking paying, $500 or $600 a month while I'm still unemployed. You know what I mean? Like, and that's one of the things that I hated about Obamacare and the way they went about it, which Obama wasn't.
Yeah, my girlfriend ended up unemployed for like 3 or 4 months while she was looking for a job. They gave her, basic unemployment insurance, but she still had to get health care. The only way around it was to continue schooling so she can get on her mom's health care, which coincidentally the county pays because her mom works at a courthouse. So she just continues going to school, which continues paying out her health care. And it's, again, one of those things where I think if we had a tightly regulated market, that would help. Problem is, there's so much opposition to it because you have lobbyists, lawyers, doctors, and other physicians in the pharmaceutical industries that their constant argument is, well, it might only cost 10 cents to make this pill. However, it costs us $100 million to research it.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah, if we don't get $100 million to research it, then we just simply won't make the medication. Regardless of how many millions of people are in dire need of it, we just simply won't do it if we don't get the money. It's almost like they're holding people hostage. And again, I don't mind the government funding research into medication if it lowers the cost. I just don't like the government having control over the health and well-being of people, because history has shown that the government's not the best when it comes to human rights. Regardless of what government you have, governments just do not factor in quality of life for people.
Yeah, I think ours kind of does, man. That's where I am.
It tries.
No. Granted, when you look at the wars that we're fucking involved in and the treatment of our soldiers, and especially once they come back here, but at the same time, I mean, all I have to do, I know I always revert to Cuba. Believe me, the way our government treats us in this country is a hell of a lot better.
Oh yeah, but again, going back to the veterans, that's a great example of government-run healthcare. If you ask any veteran, it's wonderful while you're in the military. You are treated like royalty. However, once you cease to be of any use to the military, then you got retirement benefits. It's a nice paycheck. It's better than Social Security. However, your medical coverage starts to suffer greatly, and you start ending up with long lines in very, very poorly managed hospitals. And there's very, very little the government does about it because again, it comes down to the government has to run a business, which means that it has to be cost effective. And cost effective doesn't mean always quality. It means quantity.
Granted, but oh fuck, I just forgot the point I was trying to make about with that. Well, I forgot. But at one point or another, it's got to be. You could almost. I guess the point I think I was about to make on that is that you could almost make that same argument with a lot of private insurance companies and stuff, and how they're really withholding and keeping people hostage just the same. You know, and plus, the point I was trying to make is, with a single payer, the government is not really in the business of healthcare. It's just doling out vouchers. You know, at least that's the way I'm thinking about it and the way I'm interpreting it. It's you know, now granted, the setbacks of single payer is the supposed rationing, but I even wonder if you would have to have that rationing. I mean, I don't know. So yeah,
I think
I gotta do more research onto this, but
I think the other problem I have is there's a certain mentality that comes with, well, it's not coming out of my paycheck directly. I'm not going into the doctor and shelling out $50 and it's not immediately impacting my wallet. Yeah, sure, it comes out automated through taxes, but out of sight, out of mind. And people just tend to, well, I have a cold, so instead of just taking some NyQuil, I think I'm going to go bugger the doctor instead of paying the $12. Hell, I got to pay taxes anyway, so every time I'm just not feeling well, I'm going to go to the doctor. And you see this a lot in the Philippines as well with their socialized medicine. If it's either the Philippines or Thailand, where people are grossly unhealthy. They smoke too much, they eat the worst kind of foods, and they just have a mentality of, well, I have to pay for health insurance anyways, I might as well use it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a great point, but I think that could be fixed with certain incentives that you would. I know that there's a way to do this, and well, I said, I'm going to be making a series of these till I fucking figure this shit out.
It's a horribly complicated issue because on one hand, you have the American people accustomed to basically resenting the government's involvement in most things. We just have an ingrained distrust of the government. Two, you have a large population that either works or doesn't work. And with any kind of socialized program, which single payer would be socialism in some form, you have to have a large enough population working, which means that the single payer system would have to be a dualistic system. There'd have to be one system for people working, one system for people not working. It couldn't just be a cure-all, because as it is, we have large populations that are not participating in the labor market. They've just completely either dropped out or are doing the bare minimum effort to collect benefits. And you don't see that, like in Europe, you're incentivized to work. Although they have generous welfare, it's in your best interest to work, because later on in life you'll have better benefits.
Right. I think we could do stuff like that here as well. I mean, and the main thing that I would really love to see is that at least a solution that keeps people from going bankrupt over something like that. And that's the thing with health. I mean,
I honestly don't think you should be dinged on your credit score for medical bills. And I say that because it's not like it's a commercial purchase. It's not like you went out and bought a car you couldn't afford and racked up a bunch of credit cards for useless consumer purchases. It's something that you needed out of necessity. I understand that you should be, if you rack up a bunch of college debt, that should go on your credit score if you don't pay it. It was your choice. However, medical bills should be exempt from credit scores. It's unjust.
Right. No,
And
for sure.
I that's again goes to that consumer protection.
Yeah. No, and the thing also that I'm surprised that I'm coming to this conclusion, like I said, especially I am so antithetical, I guess if that's the right word to use, towards someone like Bernie Sanders and like that whole mentality. Like I'm definitely not coming at this from a moralizing, self-righteous stance. This is not about, oh, but how can we let people, which is true. I mean, that's good. I don't want to see people dying, but more than anything, it's just the pragmatism behind it. I mean, I want to live in the kind of society where I don't have to worry that if I fucking end up with cancer and I happen to be unemployed, I'm going to be fucking bankrupt. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And then that's another thing. Maybe before, and of course, we would never go from what we have now to single payer overnight. Clearly, there's got to be a way to rein in these costs, these runaway costs, which is why this book is great, man, for anybody who's interested in how do you call it, reading that, because she really gets into like motivating people how to make sure that you're controlling the cost. Wait, I'm sorry, because I'm noticing it right now. It's just you on the screen, which is not a bad thing, but I'm trying to see what happened with the screen share.
Yeah, I don't know, but there's a whole lot of me on the screen.
No, which is fine. Which is fine. Just it kind of kills the dynamism that it had before. Let me try doing a screen share.
Okay.
Let's see if that's. I'm hoping that this is what solved it. Okay. Stop screen sharing. Now let me see if. Curious to see now if that affects what I'm seeing up here. But anyway.
And I'm agreeing with the chat here. There does need to be way more competition. I remember when they were trying to block generic drugs from Canada coming over because they tried saying they couldn't regulate it, that somehow that the Canadian drug market is filled with counterfeit drugs.
Right.
Which is nonsense because Canada has ridiculous restrictions on what kind of drugs get passed and which ones don't.
Right.
I think if we had more if we had more competition, this is the same thing with cell phones too.
Yeah.
With cell phones used to be ridiculously expensive. And then China stepped in and started making $50 cell iPhones, basically. And sure enough, now you can get an Android phone for $20 because you didn't have control of the market.
No, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, how is it possible to still have that dynamic going on, where you still have the competition, you still have the innovation going on, and yet fucking not having to worry about going bankrupt over these things, you know, making sure that you're taken care of, you know. Fuck, I don't understand what the fuck happened with with the screens here.
I don't know. I'm checking it right now.
Anywho,
yeah, you're on the screen. You're on the screen.
But no, the thing is that right now it's not working where it's, you know, like if you're talking and you come up, then if I'm talking, or is it like that now?
I'll check it. Hold on. Yeah, it's working.
Okay, you know what? Fuck it, man. Let's keep on.
I wouldn't be opposed to single payer as long as I knew that it wasn't going to be another shit show like Obamacare. Because not only did the lawmakers not bother reading into the gibberish that was that bill, because if you actually look into it, it is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of nonsensical legal babble, followed by the pharmaceutical companies basically writing their own bill. And that's the kind of problem I have.
Yeah.
Really worried that, the government is just going to do what the government does best. And, well, let's just pass this bill and hope for the best. Sure, the website cost over $100 million and didn't work well. And sure, Obamacare was a disaster that allowed pharmaceutical companies to do as they please. But you know what? In the long run, it'll pay for itself through taxation. That's my biggest issue is the government tends to, our government anyways, doesn't tend to think things through very well. It was the same way with the Patriot Act.
Right.
There was so many congressmen and legislative people from the House of Representatives, Congress, and other places that basically didn't even read the bill. Most of them are on record saying, yeah, we signed it, but hey, you know what? We didn't really have time to go through all that legal jargon. We had terrorists to fight. So we signed a bill, but we had no idea what we were doing. And it didn't work out well.
No, for sure. Yeah, that's a tricky thing, and that's what I meant. Yeah, just trying to see how can we resolve this, and I other than getting more and more involved, and having these conversations with people,
Oh yeah, I think education is the first step, and I think getting people on the local level to really take an involvement in it. Because a lot of times I think people just assume it's easier just to have taxes taken out, so it's one less thing to worry about. It's
right,
an automated fee.
Which is the way I'm thinking about it, and it's the way we do it with education, with primary education. And then it's interesting to see how like Democrats, and that mentality I don't like. I don't like how they're trying to hoard all that now, and they don't want the competition with the charter schools. They don't want the fucking vouchers.
Well, I do. Where I grew up in San Diego, you had 3 schools for elementary, depending on your neighborhood and how much money your parents had. You had the C-level school, which was basically where the poor kids went. Then you had the middle class, upper middle class school. Then you had where the rich kids went. And It was all public schooling, but depending on what neighborhood you went to and how much money, depended on how horrible your education was going to be.
Right.
And that's kind of the problem with even governmental systems. It goes back to this whole social class.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's clearly not an easy, there's no easy fix.
I know, I'm not trying to be a bummer about it.
No, not at all. Dude, hey, this is the whole point of the stream. Get other people's feedback and stuff. And like I said, it's not like I'm saying single payer is the answer and fucking I'm going to Congress tomorrow to fucking, I'm just trying to work this out. And I wanted to see by having people that I can speak to, shoot down the ideas and see. But almost every, all the criticisms that I'm hearing coming from you, I'm like, I think these things really can be fixed. I mean, they seem to be working in quite a few other countries, and
I think it's because the other countries, especially like England, they've had over a half a century to weed out these problems. They've had a great many years to implement the social structure for it. America is barely, what are we, like 250 years old at this point? I'm terrible at numbers.
Yeah, that's 17.
We're still a fairly new country. England's been around since, well, it's been around forever at this point. It's been around since the ancient Romans. They've had a long time to engineer these things into their social fabric. America is still trying to sort its shit out. We're supposed to be capitalist, but we're kind of socialist. Well, we're not completely socialist. We're also democratic. I mean, I think America in general, we haven't figured out exactly where we want to go as a nation. And stuff like even figuring out, well, just think about it. We just recently made gay marriage legal. I mean, we're still trying to figure out those kind of social issues and just trying to figure out our healthcare fiasco is another problem, especially since modern medicine is a newly contrived industry, and it is an industry.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you need to let that industry thrive. You need to let it innovate. I think it's critical to allow people to make a fucking profit. That should be fine. You know, I guess it's just having some sort of ultimate safety net. I mean, maybe that's really where I'm kind of getting at. Ultimately, is just having a safety net that keeps people from fucking going bankrupt over healthcare.
Yeah, and I honestly think we need to take a hard look at should it be legally allowed that people have to declare bankruptcy if they can't pay their medical bills? Is that even an ethical choice? And for some reason, it's completely okay to declare bankruptcy if you can't pay your medical bills. And once you declare bankruptcy, it impacts your financial quality of life.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And again, we don't have those kind of safety nets. A lot of countries do. I do like the fact, the thing I know Canada has an amazing healthcare system. However, it takes up a ginormous amount of their budget every year. However, Canada doesn't spend nearly as much on military, which is kind of the thing that Europe can afford a socialized medical system because we pay for their military defense.
No, and I've heard that argument before as well. I mean,
yeah, we're kind of paying to keep them. It's one less expense since they don't have to pay the bulk of their military in defense. That money can go into socialism. That money can go into healthcare.
But I think with the amount of waste that goes on within the military industrial
complex, yeah. Nobody needs to build
alone. Probably fucking at least be used as some sort of pool of money for anyone who finds themselves going bankrupt over healthcare. Use that. I mean, of course, now I'm thinking like fucking extreme realistic hypothetical scenarios where it's just this one giant pot of money and it's that clear cut. It's not. But the dynamic really is. There is so much waste that goes on within the military. And you hear it even from conservatives. I mean, even Glenn Beck in his book.
Oh, yeah. The military, the National Defense Agency and DARPA spends an obscene amount of money on who knows what. They're not really accountable. DARPA doesn't have to, which is the Defense Research Agency. They don't have to put down why they spent $500 million teaching a monkey to implant like circuits into a monkey. They don't have to put down why they spent $500 million on this or that. They basically have a blank check. And yeah, I honestly think our military budget is one of the biggest problems. It's a huge problem because I think it's like 1/3 of our annual taxes just goes to maintaining the military. And that doesn't include research. That doesn't include the infrastructure around the military as well. And again, I understand that we are in charge of defending most other countries. However, we've reached a point where there aren't a lot of enemies left. Russia is kind of an enemy, but they're sort of not a major threat anymore. China is a major threat, but they're not fighting a conventional war with aircraft carriers. They're mostly hacking the shit out of people and cloning technology. We're not fighting conventional warfare, so we don't need multi-billion-dollar tanks.
Right.
I mean, warfare is getting more and more compartmentalized, and it's getting cheaper. And it's not hard for a country, say like China, to build a military on a shoe budget and do quite a bit of damage. But the problem is we're still fighting in that Cold War mentality of, well, we need the latest, greatest aircraft carrier. even though aircraft carriers are completely useless at this point.
That's something I definitely I won't shoot my mouth off too much about what the military should spend their money on and what their strategies are, because God knows the amount of information they have. I go, you know, I kind of agree with that theory that it's best to have all this equipment and never use it, you know, than have to need.
I agree, but we also are still, for instance, they had a report out not too long ago about whether or not an aircraft carrier was even effective. However, they had already started building a new class of aircraft carrier. And the Navy intelligence came out with a report and said, basically, an aircraft carrier is a multi-billion-dollar floating target. It could easily be taken down by smaller, more strategic boats. I think if we had more accountability for the amount of money being spent, that's the other thing. There's not a lot of accountability. I'd like somebody to be able to tell me where the bulk of our money goes.
Yeah. No, that's that's. I was going to ask you if you had any ideas on how to, like what could be done, and that's a good one. Yeah, having more accountability, which I thought that was in Congress. They have those like today I was listening to Kristen Gillibrand, and I know that she's how do you call it? She's in charge of the Armed Services Committee. So I would assume that there's probably got to be some accountability committee or something like that. But yeah, that's that's a good one. That's very true. What other things, like if you had a magic wand and you could just be like, all right, man, here's how we're gonna fucking solve these problems, what would you do with
If I had a magic wand for the healthcare problem, I would just simply enact laws that said, okay, you know what? If you can't pay your health coverage, first I would tell the company, corporations, yeah, I understand that you guys have to make a profit. However, there is a limit on the profit because the amount of money you're making is based off of you're profiting off of human beings. That your whole industry is a service industry to people. So I would simply say you have to limit the amount of profits. 2, there has to be massive consumer protections. There has to be protections for bankruptcy. There has to be price protections. I mean, we're not allowed to charge whatever we want for certain products. Healthcare should be the same. There should be a cutoff limit. Also, I think there needs to be, again, some kind of agency monitoring it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a government agency. It can just be a consumer watchdog group.
Right.
But I don't have the magic bullet because it's been one of those things where I don't think we're quite prepared as a nation. That is a lot of screen inception.
No, I know, because I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck, what do I need to do to get it back to being automatic between you and I as we speak, you know. But anyway.
Right, and again, I don't think, and I agree with Bobby over here. There shouldn't be an incentive to get as much out of human suffering as possible. There shouldn't be this. It can be for profit, but again, there's parasitic capitalism, and unfortunately, that's one of the problems with a free market. Is you have the abuse of that free market.
Yeah,
hey, Bobby. I'm going to shut up and let him talk.
All right. I don't have you muted, do I?
He has to unmute himself.
Okay. Bobby. I guess, let me see. Do I have him? Man, I guess he's got to unmute himself. Yeah, man. I wish I had the answer. Like I said, I want to continue with these little video series and trying to see how I could start piecing something together that would just show people, hey, look, this is the solution. this is what we need to do, and then you fucking take it or leave it, you know. But
I honestly think we kind of need
by the way,
this.
I'm sorry that I'm cutting you off. Just to finish, and I think I get the feeling, I'm almost willing to bet that that solution would involve some sort of single payer system or something like that for sure. You know, I get the feeling that you would have it, and you would have that as a base. I'm talking about like a very basic thing, like that single payer does not, include, for example, you would have private bedrooms in hospitals and shit like that. No, you're going to have very basic coverage. You want to get a private bedroom in a hospital with fucking cable TV, you'd have to pay for it.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a problem with the government with a pay-in system that supplements your private, as long as it doesn't turn into the government's paying for it now, so you don't need private, because that goes back to the Medicaid system.
What you're talking about, but I think if you make it not so comfortable, if you make it like, just bare minimum, you're definitely not going to die and you're not going to go broke over this help either. I think people would, granted, there'd be a lot of people who would be more than fine with that most basic care, but I think you would get more than enough other people paying a little extra for it. Is Bobby coming on now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, is that, hey, are you finally talking?
Yeah, I didn't have my mic plugged in. Sorry about that.
No,
that's okay.
No, and now the screen's working the way it should be working. I see, like we're all three of us are up there. Anyway, so what's up, Bobby?
Oh, not much. I'm liking what you guys are talking about. I think you probably already hit this, but my biggest issue with our current setup is the way it works. Like, you get the patients end up paying the insurance companies. The doctors end up having to take out huge amounts of insurance to cover themselves against lawsuits, and the insurance companies make shit tons of money off of all of us. Like, I'd rather we limit that as much as possible. I like what you were talking about earlier with the limits on their profits. I think that they should even be like non-profit mutual fund style insurance agencies maybe, but that's kind of anti-capitalist, so I don't even I don't know.
You start running into into issues, and that was like my thing against Bernie Sanders. Like Bernie Sanders, I don't want to take him out of context. I'm going to assume that what he was trying to say was that at least for the health insurance companies, there should be no way for them to make a profit. And okay, yet I interpret that as the way he said that was like there should be no profit being made within the healthcare industry. I'm like, dude, that's fucking insane.
Yeah, that's going too far.
You're eliminating.
That was like his pay everybody student loan and just let them go to college as they feel.
That's ridiculous too. Because
yeah, that was insane.
You got to have some constraints. You have to have something before you have that fucking runaway spending with that no accountability whatsoever. But yeah, I guess it's a matter of finding those fine tuning regulations. I think right now the biggest culprit of what's driving fucking healthcare to be so expensive, is more than likely the health insurance companies first. Second, pharmaceuticals, especially that, like the government's not bargaining for pharmaceutical prices especially for Medicare. That's what one of the things that I was hearing from this woman, Elizabeth Rosenthal. That is thanks to lobbyists, I'm sure, where they're like, hey, no, look, we're fucking providing you with these drugs, take them or leave them, That's where it does become kind of extortive, But,
well, yeah, I mean, if we could trim down the cost and rein in some of the obscene profiteering on it, because that's what it is. They're simply setting their own prices, weeding out any competition and saying, well, you want to live? $900. Oh, wait, sorry. Now it's $1,200. There was that guy that bought up an obscure medication. I can't remember his name.
Martin Shkreli, or?
Yeah, he bought up some obscure medication and then decided, you know what, this medication, although it's for an obscure disease, guess what? It's now going to cost more money than what an ounce of gold is.
Yeah,
I'm just
no.
gonna set my own price, and if you really need it, well, I guess you're screwed.
That douchebag was just trolling the whole nation for his own profit.
Yeah, but that's kind of the problem.
No, and you know what the amazing thing is? How many people came to his defense, and people that I think is also part of the problem. I always consider myself a libertarian and very, very free market and all that. But I think some people, like when I hear the argument from someone like Ben Shapiro, who I normally agree with on a lot of shit, when he talks about pre-existing conditions, and I forgot what exactly his argument is against it, where it's like, no, hey, if you got pre-existing conditions, that's not the insurance company's fault. It's like, but that's where trying to find that fine line between the Bernie Sanders mentality and that Ben Shapiro mentality. There's got to be something, and I think that's where we have to just kind of fucking forget these philosophical, what do you call it? There's a word for it, rigidity. That's right now. Look at what's practical. And what that guy Martin Shkreli did, I thought was just pretty. On the surface, from what I understand, that's pretty despicable, and especially what he ended up using the money for. Fucking, I think it was a Wu-Tang Clan fucking autographed copy CD or some shit like that for like $2 million. I'm like, what a dick. But yeah,
Yeah, and again, I think again, it's a mentality issue because there are a lot of people with really unhealthy lifestyles, and if they don't have to pay for that unhealthy lifestyle, then it becomes, well, I guess it's the government's problem then.
Do you guys listen to Kraut and T? I feel like I just heard him mention that in a stream or on a video recently, where he's talking about, like, I don't know that they like force you to work out or anything, but I think they penalize you, or they highly encourage, like almost to the point of requiring you to like kind of stay in relative shape because they pay for all that stuff out there.
Yeah, he was talking about. I think he had a video about that called "Reclaiming." As part of his "Reclaiming the Left" series, I think.
Yeah,
but that's where it's in Germany, where you're required to work out and all that shit, and
yeah.
You're almost highly encouraged to have a very, very healthy lifestyle because, again, you owe a debt to your government, so you really shouldn't be wolfing down fast food 3 or 4 times a day and smoking a pack of cigarettes.
hey, what's up, MC?
Hey, MC.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
If you really want to try and lower,
Go ahead.
go ahead. If
I
you
was
really
gonna
want to
say
lower
I gotta jump out of this for a sec, so gotta go.
Cool.
Thanks for having me on, though.
All right, man. Thanks for keeping it going, man. I appreciate it, obviously.
Yep, anytime.
All right,
See you,
brother.
Nachi. Thanks, everybody that joined.
Later, man.
I'm sorry that I'm a little bit late joining. Actually, I would have enjoyed this earlier.
No, that's cool, man. That's cool, dude. And it's as I was talking about this, I almost felt kind of guilty, like shit. I thought I had been as prepared as possible, and then of course listening to Obvious with all his criticisms, I'm like, holy shit, I don't have a leg to stand on. But that's the whole point of the video too, to discuss with other people and see what other people think. And
Yeah,
see good comments here.
If you served in Germany, you'll understand the German system a little bit better, and you'll also know where the flaws are, what they don't tell you.
Right.
The biggest one, of course, is if you're sickly as a child, all right, you use up your credits when you get older and as you're aging. If you're get really old and something happens to you, they won't pay for it. There's a limit to how much they'll pay during your lifetime.
Oh, I did not know that. And that's in Germany.
That's in Germany. That's the German system. All right. So they have and of course they have a scale for that as well. But if you really want to lower costs in this country, you're going to have to get rid of government involvement to a significant degree. The insurance companies do, when you talk about them setting, how much they're going to pay for this and how much they're going to pay for that. What they do is they do what hotels do that deal with government workers. They look at the per diem set by the government as far as with Medicaid and Medicare of what they'll pay, and that's what they pay for their rates for everybody. It simplifies their forms. It makes things easy. They don't have to deal with doctors then and argue with doctors about how much they're going to pay this doctor or that doctor in this area, because it's all set already for them. It simplifies their forms. That's why they set it the way they do. You also have to take a look at why the insurance companies are even in the process of not giving out insurance, which is supposed to be something just in case, and why they're offering basically a payer healthcare type of a system. A kind of a group pool of things for healthcare. So if you really want to do this, you're going to have to do things with the government and get the government out of certain aspects of healthcare. Okay, and they use the FDA. All right, the FDA is used, all right, to keep control of healthcare, all right, in more ways than one. When it's talking about drugs and how drugs get approved or not approved, and of course that we always talk about medical marijuana or marijuana in general and how the government shouldn't be involved in regulating it. Okay, well, take out the FDA then. Now I realize that if you do that overnight, you will have incidences where some of the drugs, like interferon, which was being proposed as a new drug for AIDS, will get over. People will grab it. They'll start self-medicating regardless of what the consequences are, and then you'll have disasters. Right. In interferon's case, a lot of gay activist groups were accusing the government of delaying the release of the drug, so they got their own drugs and did their own clinical trials. And during those clinical trials, they killed about 15, 20 people because they didn't know what they were doing. Okay. And these things, whether you like it or not, can happen. All right, if you free up the drug market, if you allowed people to self-medicate more, you would see less people going to the doctors to begin with. All right, if somebody has got a cold or somebody has a small flu and they know what's worked for them in the past, do they really need to go to a doctor? Can't they just go to the pharmacist? Of course not, because in order to get what they think is going to work, okay, they need a doctor's approval. Now, I don't have a solution for all of this, all right, but I do have a solution for this. If you really want to create an area that is still controlled by the government, that you're convinced is controlled by you need some kind of governmental intervention, all right, then what you have to do is say that if you want a medical license, okay, for a certain period of time, you have to serve in a free clinic. You have to serve in these areas. And believe it or not, this has been proposed before, all right? Any kind of system like that, however, doctors, of course, are going to rebel against it, at least initially, all right? It depends on just how much they take up someone's time. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I like that idea. I kind of, now that you mentioned that, it kind of makes me think of, what is it, like mandatory service? I think they have to do that in Germany as well, and probably Israel for military. And it kind of makes me like wish that it was required here, because I probably would have enjoyed it, but I never did serve.
People would learn very quickly what that kind of medicine actually is like. After serving in the military, I can tell you there's good parts about it and some bad parts about it. The other thing that you have to do, to be honest, is you're going to have to take on the AMA. The AMA exists now for the purpose not of ensuring the certifications of the doctors as much as being the gatekeepers to limit the number of doctors that are practicing. All right, we don't need as many specialists.
Yeah, kind of like what they've done with beauty. I remember that was like with the beauty salons, like in certain cities where you have to have like these ridiculous licenses and shit like that just to be a beauty salon,
Right, exactly. All right, now for a surgeon, all right, in order to be a surgeon, you have to have a skill like an artist in a way. Okay, it's not the knowledge that makes you a great surgeon. All right, it's your ability to utilize that knowledge with exquisite physical techniques when you're operating on somebody. Okay, so that part's never going to go away. But do we really need, all right, the kind of 6-year degree for a general practitioner, for somebody that's doing something simple like setting an arm for a broken arm for a kid who fell off the playground, swing set? Now, I'm sure there are times, depending upon how the actual break takes place, all right, that you would need something that, oh my God, we really need something, really, really high level here. All right. But if you had a tiered type of a system of some sort, right, where a general 4-year medical degree can take care of a lot of these simple little procedures, all right, it would definitely reduce the cost. But in order to do something like that, you're going to have to fight the AMA.
No, and I've heard that. For me, as I've been doing my research, and you look at the major players that make up the healthcare industry, the insurance, then after that, the pharmaceuticals, then obviously you have your doctors and stuff, and there's the AMA, but that for me, I think that they're the last. Well, the doctors, I would say, should be the last villains. If you're going to vilify you're going to make anyone into a villain, I think doctors and nurses should be the last ones.
I'm not trying to vilify them, all right, but you're looking for realistic solutions, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're the ones who have the direct effect and the direct contact with the patient, all right? So therefore, they're the ones that are going to be most directly affected by any system you actually come up with.
Right. By the way, do you guys know what's going on with, I guess now it's the round 2 of the American Health Care Act with what the Republicans are trying to push now through Congress, or?
Well, it's not round 2. It's the way our system wonderfully works. What you have is all, you have a process in our country by the Constitution where if something is a spending bill, okay, all spending bills have to begin in the House of Representatives.
Right.
Okay, so the representatives did their bill and they sent it up to the Senate. Okay, so now the Senate's been working on it. Okay, they haven't released, and although they said that they're going to release it tomorrow, their version of the bill and see if they can pass it.
Right.
All right, that's part of the place. Now, we know, I mean, everyone who has any kind of common sense knows that the bill between the House and the bill between the Senate are not going to be the same. All right, at which point it will go through a process called reconciliation.
Right, okay.
Right, and then at that point, which you could look at it as round 3. Now, the good part about round 3 in this case is at least we can see what's going on because they have to do it in the open.
That's what I was listening to this morning. One of these, he was a Republican, I think, congressman from, I forgot where. Bottom line was that they were asking him, what do you think about the bill? He's like, I haven't even seen it. I can't even comment on this if I haven't seen it. And I see somebody here that said they should listen to Rand Paul, Mad Dog. And Rand Paul, I have a lot of faith in because the guy's a doctor himself. And by the way, this, let me actually pull up who this guy is that I'm talking about. Yeah, Rand Paul, I have a lot of faith in him because being a doctor himself, he knows firsthand. That's one of the things that I always hated about Bernie Sanders. Here's a guy who's like his finger telling everybody what the fuck to do, and he doesn't even work in the industry.
Well, and when you have government involvement, you're going to get that, though. You have to understand that when and the more government involvement you have, the more dictating to doctors of what doctors can't do, what they should do, is going to be leveled at them. I do agree also that another major component, if you really are trying to fix the system, is you got to fix the judicial system. You can't have people suing doctors for each and every little thing.
That was one of the
and even if you want to allow the doctors to reform, or be sued for malpractice, right? If you want to go to that degree, right? Which I can understand, and I'm not totally against. All right, don't misunderstand me. What you're going to have to do, if you really want to get rid of a lot of this crap, is remove the ability of lawyers to make major windfalls. And there's a simple way to do that, and that is, and the government as well, and that is to say, okay, wherever the lawsuit was brought, if it was brought in a county court, okay, if you're going to punish, if you've gone past the pain and suffering, and you say, well, this doctor deserves punishment, because punishment is supposed to be leveled to the individual by society, then whatever court that was initially that lawsuit was brought in, that they get that money, not the lawyers, not the family. All right, now remember, I'm talking about punishment, not the pain and suffering portion of it. All right, not the portion of it that's supposed to be fix me and give me something for the pain and suffering. Just right. The part that says, okay, we're going to punish you. That part goes to whatever court system that the lawsuit first began in, and you will get rid of a lot of these slip and fall lawyers, all right, that have gone out and driven up these ridiculous lawsuits. And as a consequence of Obamacare, one of the things that's been happening in the medical industry, of course, has been consolidation. They've been forcing out the mom and pop stores. Now, what does this mean? To the lawyers, this is a major windfall, because not only now do they get to sue the doctor or the small little clinic, now they get to sue Kaiser Permanente. All right, now we can get lots of money because they're a larger organization we get to sue.
No, wow, hey, Santa, thanks for adding all this into the chat, man. That's I mean, I all I knew was, like, with all this is tort reform. I did know that, but like these details that you've gotten into, and like the whole thing about the punitive damage part and how to, that's interesting, man. Yeah, very cool. That was another one of the many things when you start to hear this out. Yeah, you've got the insurance companies, you've got the pharmaceuticals, then the lawyers. That's someone who's need to be vilified, those fuckers. Not all of them, of course. I've got enough lawyers in my family. I know lawyers and stuff like that, but man, that's the interesting thing. The ones that become extremely wealthy over that, you know, there's something wrong with that, man, for sure. And then that's where you get that push and pull between how much government should get involved and how little. Because that's like, that almost sounds like the kind of argument where even an anarchist would probably be like, oh no, yeah, we need fucking regulation there, you know.
Well, we need some kind of a way to put a stop to the kind of litigations that are just nuisance lawsuits and the slip and fall lawyers. All right, you have to do something you need some kind of tort reform to fix that. All right, because doctors are taking it on the chin way too much. When they come out and once they become doctors, and I was talking to a guy who's becoming an oncologist. Once he now can practice being an oncologist, of his salary, 50% of it immediately goes to paying liability insurance. That's liability insurance. That's not health insurance. That's liability insurance. All right, for if you get sued for some kind of malpractice. 50% of his salary is dedicated to that. That's nonsense.
50. That's those are the numbers.
That's half his paycheck. Half his paycheck goes to, as he's starting out. I realize he's starting out, and obviously the percentages are going to be higher for, as doctors get more skilled, and they get more money, that'll go down, right? But so your starting pay, 50% of it, you give into a freaking company just to protect you from lawsuits. It's outrageous.
No, for sure, man. No, yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
So you have a doctor making $250,000 just starting, right? And he's got some big bills to pay, probably a lot of repaying all his student loans, right? And yet, 100,000 of that is directly going to an insurance company, right off the bat. Think about that. That's just outrageous. So you need tort reform. All right, if you're going to have some kind of certification process where you want doctors, you need to limit the AMA. You would also, like I said, have to create some kind of system where if you want to practice in a certain state, then so much of your time has to be dedicated to some kind of free type of clinic, all right, to reduce the simple stuff, and then you could start to work on some kind of transition for the heavier medical bills, things that are going to cost a lot of money. One of the problems with cancer and curing cancer is this: as you cure it, all right, and as survivability goes up, okay, so do the medical costs, because as they become, first of all, there's a lot of debate in the cancer community where once you get cancer per se, there is no real cure. Okay, it goes into remission and it disappears for a while. But if people are basically saying if you live long enough again, it'll come back at some point. Right now, I don't know if I totally agree with that philosophy. However, as longevity does increase, so does the cost, obviously, to the patient for coming in for checkups. All right, all of a sudden, regular checkups now become very important. People tend not to miss those checkups now, okay, because they had cancer before. The tests that they do are a bit more involved, all right? So taking care of that person now, even if they never get cancer for the rest of their life, is now more expensive. Now, insurance companies, frankly, that's why when somebody gets cancer, all right, if at some point that policy lapses for whatever reason, right, it becomes very cost prohibitive for somebody else to get re-get insurance, right? I have a couple of people that I work with. One has had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the other one has had prostate cancer. Okay, they've both been successfully treated, right? And it seems that they're totally in remission. But now, if they lose the company that they work for, okay, they will lose all their quote unquote health insurance, catastrophic health insurance, because they had cancer in the past.
Right.
So
what do you think about that? I mean, what do you think is because that sounds like the pre-existing conditions dilemma. You know, that's
it is a dilemma. All right. And to be honest, I don't have a good fix from an insurance company perspective for that. I honestly believe, however, that a lot of the devices that we use to treat cancer, all right, are too expensive. All right. And the main reason for that is because of interference from the FDA. It takes too much money. It takes too much time to bring a product to market.
yeah, that's what I've heard.
You know, so, I mean, you're going to have to tackle, if you really want to tackle health insurance, you got to realize it's a broad base. There's no one quick system. There's a multiple layer approach that has to be put into place. And the sad part is that if something breaks down in your attempt to create an approach, chaos is going to ensue. If for a short period of time or for a period of time, chaos is going to ensue. And what I mean by chaos is that people are going to be unfairly harmed one way or another. Because if you don't, for example, if you make doctors have to sit up there and do free care clinics, for example, okay, doctors are going to be unfairly targeted and then all of a sudden you're still going to have to, but you don't do tort reform where they get some relief like that. You know, this is just one example. That can happen to patients as well. All right, it can happen across the board. But I just wanted to, my main reason I jumped on here is you guys got to understand, when they talk about what insurance companies will pay, that what the insurance companies do is they match Medicare and Medicaid. That's what they determine they're going to pay for a procedure. Nothing more, nothing less.
Would that by me again? The match, in other words, whatever Medicare and Medicaid is paying out,
yep,
that's what they're going to be paying. Well, and then in that sense, isn't that? Oh, sorry, I had a motorcycle going through my neighborhood. Anyway, the point is, because that's the one thing that a lot of people are really against, the whole thing with single payer, is the whole regulation of pay and prices and all that. But at one point or another, it seems like even the insurance companies kind of do this. If it weren't for if they didn't have Medicare and Medicaid to guide them, they would set their own prices too, which is something that they do as well. I've heard that.
Well, what they would do, it would be changed to a little different method from what it was before, which is they would have to do negotiation with the doctors themselves. Okay, and the doctors would go back and forth about, okay, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I'll accept, this is what I won't accept. All right. Another cost, and I forgot to mention this, that really harms doctors and medical care as a whole, is the amount of paperwork they have to fill out.
Yeah.
All right. Now, there's certain paperwork that I kind of understand, but to be honest, paperwork should only be being filled out on the level that it is if the doctors are participating in some kind of long-term study. Then, okay, we want to try and complete these records and keep these kind of records, the total number of records that they have for long periods of time. If I walk in to a clinic because I scraped my leg, for example, right? So I just go in, they have to check me out. They put a Band-Aid on me, and a doctor comes in and says, yeah, it looks fine. Off you go. Okay. Why does that why is something like that have to keep records on it? All you did was sit up there and give me a Band-Aid. All you did was give me some advice, right, as a doctor. Why does all this have to get filled out and then sent so that stored on a system for 7 years?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, that's where you almost start getting into the whole micromanaging and shit like that. But hey, by the way, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do for a living there? Since you're very knowledgeable about all this, and I'm the one running the pod.
Actually, I work for a medical device company. We make radiation oncology equipment. I'm a medical physicist.
Ah, okay. All right. Yeah, no wonder you got this shit down, man. God, thanks for putting this all in there. Because like I said, more than anything, it's a series and I'm trying to have fun with it too, you know. But I really would love to see a solution to this, you know, and pronto, especially since I'm fucking unemployed right now. And obviously, one quick solution is to just fucking start digging into my savings and paying these exorbitant premiums for healthcare. But you know, that eventually.
One of the things that has been proposed, and I don't know how successful it would be, is something similar, but it worries me because the government is so bad at this, is a type of, you pay into a health savings account.
Right.
Like a mandatory health savings account that is then approached across the board. Okay. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know how well it would work. I'm not sure how it would be instituted. It would obviously take time to fully develop from the way that they're talking about it. All right. Because when we start talking about all these systems, when we talking about Obamacare and getting rid of Obamacare or getting rid of anything like this, all right, there are simple ways to do it. You just say, cut this off here, boom, and then you're done. But the chaos and the harm that's going to take place on some kind of level, at least for a period of time, it's just going to be, you know, it's going to be too much. Okay, so you've got to change the system, and you've got to do it slowly. All right, and what I mean by slowly is if you're really going to change the system to a lower cost, lower type of system, you have to start putting these things in place over a period of 20 or something years. Now, the bad part about that is you would have to institute it with legal systems. You'd have to do it through the law. And as you well know, every 2 years we're re-electing new congressmen who look at the medical system, who look at America in general as their own little piggy banks to play with. So would it last, what you put in place, would it last for those 20 years to actually say, okay, we're at this point here, we're at this point here? I don't know. I really don't. But it is what it is.
Wow. No, man, hey, thanks for contributing so much valuable information into this video, man. I appreciate that, MC. And yeah, I'm going to be cutting this a little bit short because my computer is starting to overheat. And right now, I was debating if I was going to make that the fucking video today about doing a Microsoft Surface book review and the fucking bad experiences I've had with this fucking computer. But I'm going to wait till the replacement comes in and see how that one works out. Hey, man, thanks.
No problem. That's the problem with smaller computers is that they have less heat displacement capability.
Yeah, but the thing with this computer, it's one of its kind. Like right now, Microsoft is, I think, the only company producing, especially on a that it's a laptop with a detachable screen that functions as a tablet, where I can actually draw into. Because one of the other things I like to do is drawing and stuff like that as an illustrator. And it's the only computer that allows you to do that through Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator. Like Mac still doesn't have that, you know. And it's a great computer. I mean, it's a fucking marvel of technology, and I'm proud to say, oh wow, I got one of the first generation Microsoft Surface books and stuff like that. And still to this day, they still haven't come up with an alternative for any other company. But man, it's been a pretty unreliable computer at the same time. I mean, I've had so many glitches with it. And then, you know, there's that whole thing. Like, I really appreciate everything that went into it, and I don't want to be like, oh man, this sucks. But at the same
Well,
time,
that goes to a problem that I see within my the company I work for, to be honest, which is software development and hardware development are two entirely different concepts. All right, on how you have to approach it, and when you try to mold the software development like you do hardware development, what ends up happening is what they call a waterfall technique, right, which slows development down drastically. All right, for software development. And of course, as you can well see, software changes like that. It's very quick. It changes very quickly and should be updated very quickly. If you tried the approach that's necessary, which they call agility programming or extreme programming, and you try to apply it to hardware, however, basically you would have hardware that was constantly breaking down. You'd have, for cars, and you'd have lemons all the time. All right, so I find when they talk about R&D and everyone wants to put R&D as a coverall to handle these different product lines, you really got to treat the product lines differently. It makes me chuckle from time to time when they try to merge them.
no, for sure. And like I said, I do not take for granted what goes into making these computers, man. No doubt about it. But I spent a good, like, what was it, $2,000 something on this computer. And then that was the thing. I remember when it came out, the CEO at the time, and I forgot who was the CEO at the time of Microsoft, and he was doing like this, like a fucking Steve Jobs style presentation. And he was just talking up amazing wonders of how the computer runs seamlessly with fucking Adobe Premiere. So I remember they were showing Adobe Premiere, and then that there's nothing lost and all that. And a lot of the things that they were promising, I've actually encountered problems with those. But it's fine. It's worked and all that. But I already had one replacement, and it really pisses me off that Microsoft, when I got it replaced, this one is just, it hisses all the time. It's like constantly, it sounds like the fan is on overdrive. And then when I called up the store and I'm like, hey, dude, what's going on with this computer? They're like, oh, no, that's normal. And I'm like, no, it's fucking not normal, dude. My other computer wasn't doing it, the one that I just got replaced. And I guarantee you, if I were to go to your store right now, I would not hear that on any of the display models. So those are like the little things that's like, fucking don't bullshit me like that either. You know what I mean?
Well, the guy you're talking to at the store doesn't know any better. I mean, he's not he's just a salesman, Yeah,
no, he sounded like he kind of knew what he was doing, and he helped me, with the replacement. Very nice guy, but once his job was, and I understand it, man. I don't want to.
He was trying to avoid a return.
Yeah, pretty much. He was
pretty much, yeah.
That's all.
But,
and see, on your 20-year plan, I'm sure you know a lot more than I do, but it sounds like a good idea. I doubt in this political climate anything can last more than a term or two.
Well, and that was my point. That's why I would say, if you're really going to implement it to minimize the chaos, it'd have to be done across what I would call close to a generation, or a score.
And it would need actual rare bipartisan support, because it would have to be supported by both parties for a long period of time.
And here's the issue. If you're going to do something like that, there's going to be elements, of course, of both sides that they would like. And there are sides, when you're making this 20-year plan, where one side is going to be, over a period of time, getting what they want, and the other side is not going to be getting anything. Right. But the other problem, of course, is there's, with all government, all right, is growing it. Bureaucracies want to grow. All right. So any kind of bureaucratic system that you have, all right, they want to grow it. And one of the requirements of this 20-year plan would be reducing the footprint of government. And what I mean by government in this case, I'm not talking about state government. I'm strictly talking about the federal government. All right. If you take a look at any federal agency, it's done nothing but grow, because that's what bureaucracies do. All right. I am calling for in certain departments, a really redressing of the need to have those departments, and that would reduce taxes going into the government. It should help people be able to afford some of these other costs that would then have to be put in place, because obviously if you're going to even have some kind of like free clinic of some sort, you can't pay the doctors nothing. You got to give them some kind of stipend of some sort. So you would have to redirect some of this stuff. And government, as everybody well knows, likes to grow. It does not like to shrink. And so over a term, you might get a president. If you get a strong, powerful president who can lean on people, who's very charismatic to drive that, that's fine. But he's only going to be there for two terms at most.
Yeah.
That's only 8 years.
Yeah. That's also, I guess, the double-edged sword of the term limits too, you know. And while I'm glad to see that now Trump wants to do away with Obamacare, especially the individual mandate, that's the one thing I really wish they would just at least get rid of that. Yeah, it does suck. I mean, like, this guy is now coming in and just doing a complete fucking role reversal. And that's also not good for a system too, you know, the constant change for the sake of change. And especially for things like this should be resolved already, man. I mean, the reason why I feel so, I guess, delusionally confident about even thinking that I could single-handedly solve this fucking problem, even though I clearly say that as a joke, is there is a solution to this, and I know it. The problem is all the self-interests that get involved. That's
true. But one of the most dangerous self-interest groups, though, that has to be recognized with is the government's self-interest, because the bureaucracy has an interest in this as well.
No, for sure. Yeah.
I was gonna point out that the Republicans have been complaining about the Affordable Care Act for years, but now that they're in charge, you see that they were kind of scrambling for a while, and I don't necessarily blame them for it. Because it is such a difficult and complex issue, but I don't think that they necessarily care about it that much either. I think they're mostly listening to, you know, the lobbyists and the guys that are in power and the bureaucrats already. So that's
I think there's a major misnomer about who people chose for their representatives, and this is one of the problems when you have only two parties. Okay, and don't get me wrong. All right, I'm not a huge person who constantly complains about the two-party system. All right, but one of the detrimental things about the two-party system is that, and this is why the election was so different this year, was people start assuming that they're electing X, Y, and Z. All right, because that guy's like me, or this is what I believe his policies are and his personal policies are. And that's may or may not be the case. All right. I'm sure all of you have heard terms like rhino, right? Republican in name only. All right. That's because there's big government Republicans. All right. And small government Republicans. All right. The small government Republicans are the quote unquote Tea Party Republicans, the bad, evil Republicans. All right. From the way that the mainstream media has portrayed them to be. But one of the things that I found interesting was, a constituent one time asked his representative, all right, or no, he's not a representative, he was a senator. He asked his senator, who it was just brand new, all right, you know, let's try and solve some of these issues. Let's take a look at this. And the guy brought out the budget, right, of what they were looking at for the year, right? And he goes, I get 1/100th decision-making power on this piece of the pie. See, so he's already looking at it as not this money being coming from the taxpayers. He's already looking at it as this is his to play with.
Yeah.
And that is, we as Americans have some good policy, you know, tendencies and some bad tendencies. One of the tendencies that we do is we tend to always look forward. We're always driving forward. All right. We don't study history. People complain that we don't know our history in the past. Okay. And that's true. All right. Mainly because we've always been a forward-looking group of people. It's not so much about what's happened in the past. It's where am I at now, and how do I get to where I want to be somewhere in the future. That's how Americans approach life. That's how we approach almost everything. Okay. It's a forward-looking mindset. Okay. But we tend to then forget that there's there's principles that are involved here, and when you start forgetting about those principles, all right, when you forget about, okay, why are things the way they are, you end up looking for the simple, easy solution. And what I mean by that is the solution that seems to be fits our feelings for the time frame, right? Rather than, okay, what's going to be the end term of, the long term effect if we do this or do that, all right? And when you're talking about government, especially federal government, and especially when you start demanding this regulation from the federal government and that regulation from the federal government, there's very little, to be honest, that the states couldn't have been doing. We don't need a federal bureaucracy the size that it is.
No, true, and that's why when I've heard people, complaining about the block grants, because that's one of the things that they're trying to do. Like, if I'm not mistaken, Rand Paul and stuff. What do you call it? He's like, I heard John Oliver complaining about that and how they want to actually block grant stuff, and it was Paul Ryan especially talking about that. I thought that that's a good thing, and then they're trying to make it seem like, oh, they're trying to fucking just chop everything. No, they're not. They're trying to fucking actually give more control to the states, if I'm not mistaken, with these block grants. They're giving money.
Yeah, the problem with that though is you end up with, okay, so it's a block grant. Well, what happens when a state says, well, I don't want to listen to some suggestion from the Department of, for example, Transportation to lower the speed limit to 55 miles an hour? Because one of the things that the reason for a while that across the United States, all the interstates and everything were 55 miles an hour was because the Department of Transportation had said, we want it to be 55 miles an hour. This was during the Carter administration. And when some states said, you can't tell us what to do, they said, yeah, that's true, but we then will withhold the grants that we give you to repair roads.
I see. All right. So then they kind of use it as,
extortion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clearly a bargaining chip for sure.
That's how our government plays ball. It's okay. That's why we need to like. I'm so like pissed right now because the media is so betraying us so badly at the moment that we're kind of like so many people just don't even really realize how bad it is. Like they don't realize how much they're being fed a straight narrative that we can't get if we can't get factual information, we're not going to be able to hold our politicians accountable at all.
Well, I think that though I actually think that the media is getting better. I know people are thinking this is crazy, but
Really?
the reason I say that is what you're saying is very true, but it isn't new either. Okay. No. They were doing this kind of stuff in the 80s. They were doing this stuff in the 70s. They were doing this stuff in the 1990s. All right. And to a much larger extent than people even understand. Okay, they were picking winners. The media had gotten to the point where they were the ones that felt that they decided who was going to be elected and who wasn't in several different areas. Now they would get surprises here and there. Reagan was one of the surprises, for example. All right, but for the most part, they were the ones trying to pick and choose who was going to be the nominees that people had. All right, and they would go out of their way if they didn't like nominee A or nominee B to absolutely destroy that person, or they would cover for that person. There's no way in hell if that wasn't taking place, right, that Bill Clinton would have survived a second term because he was wildly unpopular. Otherwise, you would not have had such a massive turnover, all right, in Congress during his term. You had 2 years of total Democratic control, just like Obama did, total Democratic control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency when Bill Clinton was elected. All right, it was under Bill Clinton's term, his first term, where he lost. The Democrats had lost control of the House in 40 years. Now that's 2 years. 2 years after that, he gets reelected. Now, how does that happen? All right. The only way that happens is one, the Republicans, quite frankly, chose Bob Dole, who is a
you hit me on the head.
Well, he is he was a dry ball senator from Kansas who had never who had never been in an executive type of position where he had to make decisions. All right. And it came out. It was obvious to everybody. Right. But the other reason is that it was because how successful the media was in hiding the absolute malfeasance of Bill Clinton.
Oh yeah, no, the excuses they were making, kind of like what they did with Hillary. You know?
Well, exactly, exactly. But under Hillary now, the problem that Hillary has is that this is why I was saying this about the media. That media's ability to totally control it has been broken now. That's why Hillary lost. Go ahead.
No, finish your point.
So the reason Hillary lost the election was that the media, the mainstream media, right, lost control of the narrative to such a degree because there's so much out there now. There's so many other outlets that people can go to get information that they no longer have control of the distribution of news. And once that happened, okay, people started to learn more about what Hillary had done. Now they still don't know the full extent of Hillary's malfeasance. All right.
I'm surprised Clinton Cash didn't make a bigger. I thought for sure Clinton Cash, the documentary in the book, was going to be her downfall, and that was hardly what factored in. It was amazing how it was the simple, petty shit like the emails, you know, and the server and stuff like that. That's what people focused on, and then to a large degree, I saw a great documentary on Netflix. This is like one of those documentaries that makes me keep fucking keeping on Netflix. Have you seen Get Me Roger Stone?
No, I haven't.
Oh, great. And I kind of had my respect for Roger Stone for a little while. Because believe me, I don't get my news from fucking Alex Jones on InfoWars or anything like that. But I always found him kind of entertaining until now that I discovered I didn't realize he was denying the whole thing that happened in Sandy Hook. That he was fucking playing around with that, like almost turning that into a 9/11 truther shit. I'm like, dude, you're a douchebag. Yeah, because I always found Alex Jones to be somewhat entertaining and like, you know, like a broken clock. He seems to be right at least twice a day or something like that with some of his things, some of the things that he stands for. But in this documentary about Roger Stone and how Roger Stone really helped influence and manipulate the, you know, his end of the media, especially with InfoWars and stuff, to get Donald Trump elected, and like all the machinations with this guy Paul Manafort and how they dealt with, you know, how they did political consulting back in the 80s and stuff, and then how they dealt with fucking dictators in Africa. And I was like, whoa, holy shit. It's
well, yeah, nobody's walking around or walking away, all right, who's not going to have some kind of, especially if they dealt with anything in any kind of international spectrum. Unless you're talking, your only international experience has been to deal with just a certain series of countries within Western Europe, you're coming back with dirt on your hands, or you're going to come back dirty. And what I mean by that is it's going to be thrown your way, even if you did nothing wrong. The fact that you're even talking to these people or dealing with these people, all right, is something that's going to be portrayed by your political opponent, because that's what they do. They're going to try to portray you in your worst light. They're going to try and portray themselves in their best light, and they're going to try to portray you in your worst light when you're trying to get elected. All right, it's going to come out, and there's wild accusations. The difference is are those accusations going to stick or not? Well, when the media was being directly controlled and having total control over the narrative, all right, they were able to influence a lot of races drastically. All right, simply because I mean, take a look, for example, Mitt Romney. Wasn't too long ago. They basically, you know what lost him the election more than anything else, in my opinion? It wasn't his we've already lost 40% of the country speech, right? I think it was when they accused him of abusing animals because he put his dog on top of the station wagon when they drove across country.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, no,
and I didn't vote.
But look how the press portrayed that. And how much traction it got. Something simple like that, and how much traction it had. And it did have an effect on people. They're like, oh, wow, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and I'm not saying that anybody could have beaten Obama at that point in time. I'm just talking about how the press portrayed that. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous.
It's fairly
No, no, for
obvious
sure.
when they have bias. Oh, sorry, Nachi.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's fairly obvious when they have bias. I mean, look at what they just did with Trump a couple weeks ago with 2 scoops of ice cream. Like, this has been my problem with the media for the longest time. It's like, I want actual journalism, not just like, Vanity Fair or whatnot.
Well, that's true, and but like I said, it's the internet media. It's this medium that we have, right, that has really broken their total control over this. It made a crack. Matt Drudge made a crack with the blue dress under Bill Clinton, but it wasn't fully exploited until really YouTube. YouTube has really changed the game for the ability of the press to totally control the narrative now.
Right.
Because you can hear news from anywhere and everywhere, and people can then ask questions. Now, there's a lot of trash, obviously. There's a lot of misinformation that comes obviously in YouTube and a lot of these websites, right? But that was always been true. But people in America, we as Americans, had gotten to the point where we actually believed, and even I was like this. Back in the 80s, I believed we had the best press in the world, that we had the most fair and the most honest press in the world, until I got pulled aside one day and said, start looking at it from this perspective and start analyzing this. And I said, okay, I'll take time, and analyze this, just taking a look at some of these things. And I'll be damned if they're not right. The press hadn't really changed. The fact, the difference is that they had total control of the narrative in the media. There were very, very, very few counter arguments, all right, to disabuse some of the absolute rancid crap that they were coming out with.
No, for sure. Right now, I'm trying to look under the documentary of Roger Stone. There was a really great scene, dude, where he just shamelessly admits, like what you're talking about, how the media manipulates and controls and fucking, it's the simple things that get people elected or unelected. And he's in a limousine. There's a moment where he's like in the limousine and he's just admitting how he has managed to influence politics according to his worldview. And that, for me, I was like, holy shit, I'm assuming that's what probably Friedrich Nietzsche meant by the will to power. And this guy being behind the scenes, like Roger Stone, being someone so behind the scenes and stuff, he still managed to almost get his way and fucking influence the course of history, dude. That's impressive. And
it's not new though. You remember Hearst?
Yeah, William Randolph Hearst, you mean?
Yeah. Well, he got us into the Spanish-American War.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that with the whole thing of the what was it? With the ship that they supposedly made it seem like it got blown up, and then now we're at war and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, but it was more his yellow journalism about just how awful the Spanish colonies were treating their people, and there's truth to that, all right. But they sensationalized it to such a degree that it was way beyond. People believed that every day the peons were being whipped back into shape, and it was back to the days of the South, prior to the Civil War, and that's how these people were being treated. They had people convinced that the Cuban people were nothing but slaves, all right, to the Spanish crown. And that's not saying that the Spanish crown was a wonderful, thing, and that people weren't being mistreated, right? But it was so overblown, and he had such a wide reach, all right, in his newspaper empire, that he was able to spread it across the nation, where the nation was willing to go to war over that at the drop of a hat. And then, of course, you have the U.S. In fact, the U.S. Maine was sent there, all right, strictly to say, hey, we're going to show you the might of the U.S. military, right? And then all of a sudden it blows up. Oh, well, now war's on now. Because he basically accused the Spanish of blowing up the Maine, sending sappers. Now, we have no idea how the Maine actually sunk. I mean, we didn't have the tools back in the the late 1800s to examine these kind of things and to find out what actually happened. All right. It could have been blown up by a number of people. It could have been just a simple accident as well. But that's how history is portrayed, unfortunately.
No,
I
no.
heard Alex Jones talk about this. He said it was a false flag.
Well, the thing to remember is just because you want something to be some way, all right, when something's fortuitous, doesn't mean that it is that way, number one, and doesn't mean that it is what people think it is. Let's take a look at an example of the Syrian gassing, all right, that everyone talked about a few months ago.
Yeah.
All right. Now, one of the things that I found particularly disgusting was people who said that the reason that they know that that was a false flag, that it didn't happen, and that their gas wasn't used, is that the doctors themselves were washing these patients off and treating these patients, right, with their hands, all right, being exposed and not being in suits. Okay. Now, sarin is a water-soluble chemical weapon, all right, and minimal exposure will have an effect on you. But that doesn't mean that these doctors who are trying to treat these patients weren't willing to risk their lives to take care of this. It reminded me of Richard Jewell, the guy who was trying to help people get away from the bombings that happened in the Atlanta Olympics, right? Where they turned around and the press basically said, well, he's the one who should be investigated. He was the guilty party. It's very likely he had something to do with this. And they ruined that guy's life. And it was an absolutely despicable thing, started, of course, by NBC News. All right. And yet here are doctors who have in the past, all right, been willing, we know of doctors, I should say, not necessarily these doctors, who had been willing to treat their patients and have some of the mild side effects of nerve poisoning just to treat patients, to risk their lives. When you're making these kinds of statements, you could be really doing these people are heroes. All right. And look at the disservice that you're doing to them when you're accusing them of saying, oh, you would never do something like that. Just because you're not willing to risk your life doesn't mean that these doctors aren't. That's all I'm saying. Right. And it was only because people wanted the narrative to be true, not true. Right. They wanted the narrative that the Syrians used chemical weapons not to be true. All right. That they would believe these things without any evidence against these doctors. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, and once again, I'm not even saying what exactly happened. I believe the Syrians used it. I honestly believe that Bashar Assad has no control over his military complex. I think it's his generals are basically doing things on their own for the most part. But that's my personal belief. Okay.
And that was
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that was something that I was glad to see from at least some of the people on the Alex Jones camp, like Paul Joseph Watson, Stephen Molyneux, and all these guys, that when Donald Trump ordered the attacking of that chemical plant, they were actually like, hey, this is not what we voted for. We did not want more aggression. If we wanted that, we would have voted for Hillary Clinton. So it was good to see that they were at least being pretty consistent with their principles, and that was the weird thing, to see how CNN and MSNBC, like was it Brian Williams? He was like fucking these beautiful bombs and shit like that. And you're like,
yeah, the beautiful missiles going up. And
I thought you guys, didn't want this, and now that Donald Trump is doing this, like now all of a sudden, that I did find kind of odd. But here, speaking about the way things get influenced, let me see if I can share the screen really quick, and I hope I don't get a copyright strike for this, but I think this is so fucking telling of Roger Stone. Let me share this one thing that I'm going to show you right now. Is a scene from that documentary. Hold on one second. Let's see.
Well, just let it play for 30 seconds.
It is the swamp. I'm proud of the job I did at Black Manafort and Stone because I made a lot of money. And I can't think of anything I did that was either illegal or immoral. You play by the rules as they're written. When they change the rules, you change the way you play the game.
When you talk to Roger about his business and morality, he sees morality as a synonym for weakness. That's something that he's always going to have contempt for.
And here's like the scene.
Okay, go ahead and delay it for a little bit.
say I have no soul, those who say I have no principles are losers. Those are bitter losers. Everything I have done, everything I have worked for is to propel ideas and a political philosophy that I want to see dominant in government. Donald
Okay,
Trump had
stop it for just a second.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, I laugh when people sit up there and do some of these things like this, right? Have you ever seen the movie Roger and Me?
Yes. Oh my God, I hated that movie when I was younger.
Well, it was an old movie even when I was taking an upper level history course. All right, and I was in at the time I was in the military and I was stationed at Fort Devens, and I was taking a radicalism in American history course, and I had to sit through this movie of Roger and Me. Right, and I because obviously I was the only one who was from the military in the course. Right, this was University of Massachusetts Lowell. I was on their campus. I was basically a lightning rod for these guys, which is fine because I enjoy that stuff, to be honest. I enjoy that kind of banter. Although the professor did tell me he one time after 2 weeks of being in the class, he came up to me and another guy and said, "You two guys," because 10% of the class was the grade was going to be class participation. He came back and said, "Unless I call on you guys are no longer allowed to just jump in and speak." I said, "You've already got your participation points. Don't worry about it anymore." You know? He goes, "The problem is that you two dominate," and it was me on one side and this other guy named Noel, all right, who was a hardcore communist and bragged about how he had a picture of Karl Marx on his desk, right? So I mean, between the two of us, we'd go back and forth, and no one else would get a word in edgewise. So we were told that unless I ask one of you guys just stay there and be quiet. I was like, okay. But when we were watching Roger and Me, we got done with it, and everyone was going around making their comments and everything, and I was being the good little boy, like I said. And he got to me and he said, "Well, what's your opinion?" I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." The whole movie is about how Flint, Michigan's going down the tubes because GM is closing all these plants, right? And he wants to talk to Roger Smith at the time. And I said, "Well, here it is. Back in the 1950s and the 1960s, this company offered people a standard of living that most Americans would have killed for. These low-level workers had a standard of living superior to almost any other group of people in the country. And what did they do with it? Did they save it? Did they try to keep it? No. As time period went by, all right, as the world started to change around them, they themselves didn't want to change. They kept everything the way it was. They had the unions telling them nothing's changing while they're getting, $15, $20 an hour, just screwing on a bolt on this car. And they're watching plant after plant after plant close rather than adjust to this. And you want me to feel sorry for them now that this company said, look, we can no longer pay you and up and leave? What about these people? What responsibility did they have for their community, for what was going on and how this was going on? And I ended it like that, and for a good minute and a half, no one else spoke a word in this auditorium. And the professor was like, "We can't land under this. Come on!" And that's what when I see these kind of things. But let's go back and finish the video. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that was great. And by the way, when I saw Roger and Me, the first time I saw it was like in high school. I was like junior, whatever. And even then, I was like, "There's something wrong with this." I couldn't put my finger on it. Where I was like, Michael Moore. And at the time, I was like, "Oh, this fat guy with a fucking baseball cap." I was like, "This guy, he's doing something." I didn't even know the word disingenuous at the time. I was like, "There's something not right about what this guy's doing." And the only one thing that I could word was. Well, I remember when he finally does get, I think, an interview with the CEO. Like he was like really trying to make the guy look like a villain and trying to guilt him and shit like that about how to run his business. And I remember thinking to myself, dude, that's what businesses are supposed to do, man. They have to fucking cut costs. If not, everybody loses their fucking jobs. And it is so sad that so many, it is what it is.
Well, the thing is all of us humans, there's one thing about human beings, all right, especially as we get older, we get comfortable. We get into a rut. We don't want things to change. We're happy with the stasis that we're in at some point. Okay. And we get it through our heads, all right, that things aren't going to change. But that's not the world. That's never been the world. you can go all the way back down, all right, all through the centuries, all right. Mankind and the world has always changed. Now, granted, a lot of that change way back when was due to, for lack of a better term, nature. Nature drove a lot of change within our environments, right? A storm here, an explosion there of a volcano, an earthquake, all right, would change the dynamics of the situation locally, which would then have massive spreads as this kind of change ripples across, the continents as a whole, right? It's always been that way. All right. Mankind has lately gotten in its head that we control nature now. Right? We're in control of nature, and it has less of an effect on us. And to an extent, that's true. We do have a much better control over how nature affects us. A hurricane that would kill literally thousands of people, all right, just by coming in there and flattening their houses. Now most houses are barely impacted. All right. I mean, yeah, can it still happen? But not like it used to be. Right. And we've gotten used to the fact that we don't have to worry about, the bear breaking in the door and eating our children. We don't have to worry about a cholera epidemic, because we didn't know what cholera was. All right. Wiping out an entire village of people. All right. Without knowing what it is. So in some regards, we have less of a threat from nature. All right. Now, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Hard to say, because as that threat more or less went down, the threats from each other have gone up. Well, we do a much better job of killing one another now than we did in the past, when we were just running around with bows and arrows.
Oh, sure, man. Hey, listen, I'm going to now have to cut this short. My wife just got in and stuff, and like I said, the computer's still kind of overheating and shit. But dude, man, thank you both for sticking around. And MC, man, thanks for all the contribution you made to the video, man.
I appreciate it.
And yeah, man. So I guess till next Wednesday, hopefully, maybe I'll have the solution to the healthcare crisis in this country. Who knows?
Good luck.
Well, look forward to it. Thanks for the invite.
No, man.
Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
No, man. You too, dude. Take care, bro.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Later. And so that concludes this Nachi free live stream, where I like to think I came slightly a bit closer to what could be the solution to the healthcare. At least we know all the problems. That's for damn sure. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and good night.